Before I get into my talk, I am from the western Upper Peninsula of Michigan. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about relates to Wisconsin, but I'm going to give you a little story that's going to start out where I'm hoping to go all together here. You can't tell from my last name, but I'm also of Finnish heritage, and Finlanders are known for being a few words. And I'll give you a story from the middle of summer in the western UP. Lots of people were going out fishing, not catching a darn thing. It was hot, but this one guy, Toivo, this Finlander, every time he went fishing, he came home with his limit, and nobody could figure it out. Just down the block from Toivo lived the game warden, or conservation officer. And one day, Toivo pulls in the driveway, sure enough, pulls the stringer out with his limit, and the warden goes over and he says, "What's your secret, Toivo?" He says, "Where do you fish?" And he gave him Chicagoan Lake. Everybody goes there. It's a popular lake. He says, "Do you use a special bait?" And he says, "I'll tell you what, warden." He says, "Tomorrow morning I'll pick you up at the crack of dawn and we'll go out fishing and I'll show you how it's done." So the next morning they go out to the middle of the lake, drop the anchor. Warden puts his bait on. He starts casting and doesn't pay much attention to Toivo. He's down in the tackle box, and all of a sudden, stick of dynamite comes out, goes into the lake, kaboom! Fish all over the place. Toivo has the net out, he's scooping them up, and the warden's he couldn't believe it. He's just incredulous. And he's, Toivo, he says, "I can't." And he didn't notice Toivo had put the net down. He's back in the tackle box, and Toivo pulls out another stick of dynamite, lights it, about a 2-inch fuse on it, throws it to the game warden, and says, "What you gonna do, talk or fish?" So that's, I like to liken myself as the guy with the stick of dynamite. So, figuratively, of course, is that a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about stuff. I like to talk about it a little bit and get into doing it. So, with that, I'm going to get into a little bit of my background before I get into the programs I've been involved with. The presentation outline, what I'm going to do is talk about definition. What is workforce development? What I think it is. Maybe you have a totally different idea. Logging industry, where's it at in the country? And I'll talk about where it's at in the lake states as well. Existing programs that I've worked with, helped develop, just assisted with over the years. And what are the needs of the industry, of forest industry? Forestry certificate is something I came across this winter, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience with that at the high school level. Menominee Tribal Enterprises is a tribe in Wisconsin that I've worked with over the past 33 years in varying capacities. I'll just talk a little bit about where they're at with management and workforce development. And then mechanized and manual training. Manual, I'm talking about chainsaws. Just where it's at, what we've done with it. And then my recommendations, and what I want to hear is your recommendations. I got a lot of slides. I put a bunch of pictures in here just so I could go through them pretty quickly. So I'm going to go fairly fast through the slides, but I wanted to hit points. I wasn't sure exactly where we were going with this, so I wanted to throw out everything from my background and experience, and as you come up with questions, just let me know. So I was with the Wisconsin DNR. Actually, I was with them for 17 years in total. I was with them as what they called an LTE, a limited term employee, before I started in 1984. I worked in inventory, fire control, and then ended up in forest products. From there, I went to Forest Industry Safety and Training Alliance. With them, we were the training organization that did the SFI training, Sustainable Forestry Initiative training in Wisconsin. And I was responsible for 400 training programs a year. Did a few of them, oversaw all of them. Helped start Professional Loggers Association in Wisconsin. I was a subcontractor with the American Logger Council. I'll talk about them a little later. Also with a couple different associations. I'm chair of the Wisconsin Consulting Foresters right now. And the Wisconsin Environmental Education Board is kind of an interesting organization that I'm a board member of. Our primary purpose is giving grants out to schools to facilitate natural resource education. They can be up to 20,000, most of them are under 5,000. And we have 81 school forests in Wisconsin. And what we like to call them is the outdoor classroom. And this grant program is to encourage that. So Renewable Resource Solutions is my company. I am under contract. The reason I'm here is I'm under contract to the Forest Products Marketing Unit of the Forest Products Lab, which is part of state and private forestry of the Forest Service, not their national forest system. I did a contract recently 3 years ago with Menominee Tribal Enterprises, a management plan for their value-added industry. I have been an instructor at a community college for a logging certificate, which was a disaster, which I'll talk about. And I also speak at the forestry program at UW Stevens Point in Wisconsin about 2 or 3 times a semester. And I still do training under contract. Sustainable Resources Institute is a nonprofit that I got when I first started my company. I did quite a bit of grant writing for various groups, and there was one nonprofit that I worked with a lot and worked real well with, and they got a new executive director who I did not work real well with. So I said, to heck with it, I'm going to start my own nonprofit. So I got the former chief state forester from Wisconsin and professor from UW-Madison, and we started our own nonprofit, and primarily to get the master logger programs going, but over the years we don't advertise, but as projects come up we jump into them. The safety and woods worker training I'll get into in a little bit, as well as the summit. Workforce development. Need for employees in the forest industry, but once you have the employees, is developing the skills within the industry. So that's my two definitions that I look at with workforce development. And here's the logging industry numbers. It's kind of funny because we were doing research trying to figure out what the numbers were, and there's actually one out there from 1890 that the Minnesota DNR did for the nation, saying there's 20,000 loggers. Department of Labor, 57,000 in 2007, 43,900 in 2012, and they're projecting that it's going to go down to 40,100 in 2020 or 2022. And all this gets back to what is a logger. I mean, in Wisconsin, we got guys that only log in the winter, do construction in the summer, log in the winter. So if you log for 3 months, are you a logger? You know, at what point do you draw the line and call somebody a logger? And just looking at it and trying to figure out, I called up the American Logger Council and I said, what do you use for numbers? And they said, we have no clue. You know, if you look at different statistics, you know, if you don't have insurance, if you're a sole proprietor working on your own, you fall through the cracks a lot of times. So it's hard to define it. In Wisconsin, just going by 53 master loggers that have 276 employees or subcontractors, they harvest 30% of the timber harvested in Wisconsin. And just multiplying that out, I come up with roughly 920 loggers in Wisconsin. Forest Industry Safety and Training Alliance, I mentioned them. We started out in 1991. Actually, when I was with the Wisconsin DNR, I assisted in getting it going. We got a grant from OSHA to get it started, and it was to address the worker comp rate and injury rate within the forest industry, primarily focusing on chainsaw. And we hired 2 trainers to go out in the woods and do the training. And then in 1995, when SFI came along, Sustainable Forestry Initiative, there was an opportunity to expand the training. So at that point, I left the DNR and became executive director of the FISTA, is what it's known as for short. So the curriculum today, the mandatory core is best management practices for water quality and for invasive species. The core, when it started, was water quality, BMPs, and safety. So I think they figured they had enough of safety as a core that we kind of beat it to death early on. And under continuing education, there's what we have that's currently done today. I guess like hydraulic safety and maintenance, that's done by dealers. Technology, we also have GPS experts, people talking about adaptations on your phone with laptops, that sort of thing that come in. So it isn't all on staff. Actually, very little of it anymore is staff time. It is mainly contractors. Number of participants. When we were just chainsaw safety training starting out in 1992, 400 people went through the program. 97 when we got into the SFI training. 4,600 is the number of people who went to classes. The actual number of people was 1,700. Because of the core curriculum, a lot of them were taking 3 classes. So we didn't have 4,600 loggers. It was just 4,600 people participated in at least one class. 2007, we're down to 1,800. That's because some of the standards changed within the industry. They have a training committee with SFI where they didn't have as many hours. They're looking at continuing education, doing the BMP training every 7 to 8 years, I believe. So the number keeps going down, as do the number of loggers in the industry. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Master Logger Certification Program. This is not a training program. There's a lot of names out there that have Master Logger in it. A lot of them just connotate training. This is not one of those. This is actually comes from the American Logger Council, and I'll get into the background on that. But basically what we do is an initial interview. There's a $250 application fee. So if after the interview they say, this isn't the program for us, this isn't what we thought it was, they get their $250 back. But then if they go through the interview and want to continue, we do a field audit. We have 2 auditors go out initially, 1 logger and 1 forester. And then they get a report to the certifying board. The interview goes to the certifying board and the field audits, plus any comments from the logger. So the logger sees everything from us before it goes to the certifying board. So if they see anything they disagree with or don't like, they have the chance to rebut it. But also, it's our practice, I'd say 99% of our audits involve the logger out there on site. So he's right there when we're going through the audit, so he has the chance to explain anything that they might have a question on. And this is how it functions, the American Logger Council, and then GLTPA and MAT. It's Great Lakes Timber Professionals Association is the overseeing body in Wisconsin, Michigan Association of Timber in Michigan. They are members of the American Logger Council. American Logger Council is an association of associations. Both of those organizations contract out the Sustainable Resources Institute, and we do the implementation of the program. Master Logger Committee is made up of 8 loggers from around the state in Wisconsin that have input into how the standards are developed. And then the certifying board, we have 8 members in Wisconsin. We tried to do the sectors. There's 1 logger on there from out of state because we didn't want anybody in state. That how do you pick one guy from in state? So we have a logger from Michigan on that board and vice versa for the Michigan board. And it has to be unanimous. The certifying board has to have a unanimous vote for somebody to become a master logger or not become one. So if one person has a problem, they have to work it out and figure out, do you need another verifier to go out? Do you have more questions? And the other thing that we do is both the logger and the verifiers have to be comfortable that it's not biased. So if the logger says, I don't want that guy on my job, he's not out there. We put another verifier in there because we don't want it prejudiced either negatively or positively. You know, if he's a buddy with them, we don't want him out there. If he's got some past issue with them, we don't want him out there. 33 master loggers in Michigan, 53 in Wisconsin. And these are the areas of responsibility that the American Logger Council came up with. And then the individual states are required to come up with their own performance standards underneath that. So it's all pretty, I'm not going to read all of them, but basically dealing with in-woods and business practices. In Wisconsin, we have 117 performance standards. In any one audit, we're going to hit 40 to 50 of those. In an initial audit, we do 3 timber sales. We're hoping that we hit somewhere between 80 and 100 out of those 3. So a lot of them won't apply. It's just the type of ground they work on, the type of work they do, and who they log for. If they're logging for forest industry, lots of time forest industry takes care of the roads ahead of time, and they don't worry about that. So I'll just go through here quickly. Soil and water covers roads, landings, stream crossings, working along streams and RMZs and wetlands, spills, and then skidding and forwarding. Next one, management practices. And under aesthetics and wildlife, we also have, I didn't spell it out real well, we also have archaeological, natural heritage inventory, and anything else that is specific to the site that should be made aware of when they're logging in there. And having a contract is a big thing. Having a harvest plan is a big thing. It can be simple. We don't require extensive documentation on that. That was a big fear of loggers when we started this program, is that it was just going to create a whole bunch of paperwork for them. And what we've done is we actually have a sample contract. We have amendments to contracts and safety plans. Everything we can do for them, we try to do for them to have pre-written. Safety is a big thing. General safety, anything from signage, PPE in general. Chainsaw, we do a separate report for everybody out there with a chainsaw, as well as every piece of equipment under mechanized. And the main thing that keeps people out of the program is chainsaw. I'd say 7 of 8 is chainsaw issues, dealing directly with safety. And one thing that they've done, that the certifying board has done, I think 3 years ago they did it, that I really liked, is they no longer reject anybody. What they do is say, here's why you didn't make it. You've got 6 months to correct it. And sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's multiple things, but then it's up to the logger. The onus is on them to correct it. Here's just some slides going through. This is looking at soils, trail armoring, so you're not doing rutting or soil compaction. Even though there's snow on the ground, we have very limited frozen ground anymore. The last 2 winters have been the exception. Before that, we had a lot of winters where we had no frozen ground. So that always used to be the fallback by foresters, is only log during frozen ground conditions. And sometimes we can have 2 feet of snow on the ground and still not have frozen ground because of the snow. Another one, here's an interesting one. In a red pine plantation, they came across a grave from, I believe it's 1919, from a mother and son died of pneumonia and buried on the site. And when they planted it, they made note of the grave, and this is the 4th owner since that time. And they've kept up the grave and made the logger aware when he went in on it. So that was kind of an interesting one. We take a look at first aid supplies. These are in the trailer. Also should be a kit on each machine. And this is looking at the landing area. Many landing areas are just along the road. They don't develop a specific landing just to turn around for the truck and then load up on the road as they go out. And what we're looking at here is drainage into waterways or rutting, anything like that. Fire extinguisher, always check them, and other fire suppression systems they might have. And as I said, chainsaw is a big thing. Looking at the width right here of the hinge, whether the notch cut matches up. You'll see this looks like an awful skinny notch here, and this is called the open face notch, where it's 60% or greater typically of an opening. So you don't need a lot of opening. In our hardwood, they really like it for the veneer and high-grade saw logs. So that's a big thing we look at. Do they have signage up if they're on a road with heavy use? Another safety thing. And then stream crossings. You know, did they, on the left is a permit that's required to be put up on the trees. On the right, just showing a temporary bridge that was put in. And the program, a lot of people thought when it started was regulatory, and it's not there to limit logging, but to push the reality of logging. And what we have come up with is training issues, both for the loggers and for the foresters. You know, we had 2 years ago, we did 36 loggers recertification visits within a month period, and all 36 of them had a common complaint. And that's the foresters. It didn't matter who they were, agency, consultants, or industry, their cruises were way off. And we finally had a good winter when they could get in the frozen ground. And instead of getting 3 jobs done, a lot of loggers only got 2 jobs done because the estimate was off. So instead of 1,000 cords, they ended up cutting 1,500 or 1,600. And a lot of foresters say, well, who cares if it's scaled sale, if it's not lump sum? But then the loggers out there a lot longer, spending a lot longer on site. So since then, there's been training sessions around the state working with foresters on that issue. So it's not just out there for the loggers, but out there to help the loggers as well. And what it is, the reason it initiated, and this is why I'm not sure how well it fits with tribal, but you could do some adaptation of this to fit your needs. It was started because we had 26 loggers apply initially, and one of the questions we asked is, why are you doing this? 24 of the 26 said it was because of perception. They're sick of their kids coming home from school and asking why they butcher trees. And the other thing was working with private landowners. Some of these guys, they had no problem. They already had all the wood they could get. In Wisconsin, 60% of our timberlands are private, non-industrial. Only 9% are federal. I believe 8% is state and 14% are county. So the private is a big thing, to market your services to the private landowner. So this is a way to say a third party says we're doing an okay job. So that doesn't necessarily fit with tribal, but you look at our performance standards, there might be a way to adapt it. Another thing, we had a summit in 2013. An interesting thing that came out of this is it was just done to see, you know, every 10 years they do one of these summits, and to, you know, why are our forests healthy and sustainable, and what are the common goals and issues that the various sectors can work with together. We had 172 stakeholders from everything from the value-added industry down to the landowners there. And one thing that came out, we had over 60 speakers. We had 6 breakout sessions happening at a time. So a lot of these sessions we only had 15 to 20 people in. But the whole idea was so people be comfortable to talk and go back and forth. And no matter what the session, we always got back to workforce, whether it was in the paper industry, the secondary door manufacturers, the loggers. Workforce development was a huge thing that came out of there. And here's what they came up with. We have what we call a Governor's Council on Forestry that oversaw this. So this went back to them, and these were the recommendations. And I will tell you, there's not universal buy-in to this, but these are, you know, the recommendations that came out of it. Is create a pathway from education to career, increase funding for tech ed programs. Wisconsin has a very extensive technical school program. I believe there's 22 institutions in the state. Some are fairly small, others very large programs. Very few of them have forestry. I think there's 4 that have forestry directly in them, either secondary industry or as a technician program. And training for forestry skills development in urban areas, I'll pass that one by. Educate future prospective workers, and do something with the junior and high school level curriculum. And industry reaching out and working together with forestry education organizations better, and a credible program for mechanized logging operators. And I'll get into that in a little bit. forestry certificate is one that I came across last winter. Let me just back up. Economic development director called me up and said she's working with a school that's putting in a grant through workforce development, and she said the school thinks they've been way too focused on college education. They wanted to get into more technical careers. And they had what they called a Fab Lab, and I won't even try to explain that, but another thing they wanted to do with that to get into more technical skills was develop a forestry certificate. And she asked if I'd put it together, and I said, sure, and when is it due? And she said, 3 o'clock. And I said, today? And she said, no, tomorrow. So I threw it together, we sent it in, they got it funded, but they left the forestry certificate out because they said there is no such thing. And I had no clue. The school asked for it, I thought that's all we needed. Went to Department of Public Instruction, they said there's 3 ways to get it. We either have to develop it at public instruction, tech school needs to develop it, or you need to get it from industry. And I said, well, that's simple, we're going to get it from industry. And then I called public instruction up and said, how do we go about this? And they said, well, we don't do that anymore. And I said, well, that's not acceptable. And on the Wisconsin Environmental Education Board, there was a member on there from public instruction. I called her up and she said, oh, yeah, absolutely, we still do that. Here's who you want to talk to. So I had a meeting with them last week, and they're actually talking about doing dual enrollment with technical colleges. We can get a certificate where the schools will get paid up to $1,000 a student for those who go through it. Plus, we could do a dual enrollment with technical schools where they can get credit ahead of time. So I'm very excited about it. It's something that we're still working on, but looks like there's a lot of potential for it, and we have a lot of buy-in, both from schools and from forest industry. And the funding is allocated to high schools for each graduate. And basically the intent is to mitigate workforce shortages, inform students of forest industry careers and jobs. The one school system that called me up, forest industry employs probably 70% of the people in that county, but there is nothing within the school curriculum on it. It was not anything that the students really looked at as a career path. So I give them a lot of credit for identifying that and looking into it. And as I mentioned, there's the dual enrollment. And the way I set the certificate up is there's a general overview of forestry, but then there's 4 emphasis areas. Logging, log trucking, primary industry, which would be sawmills, and secondary, which would be anything that uses the lumber coming from the sawmills. Flooring, doors, whatever. Menominee Tribal Enterprises. I'll just talk about them briefly. As I mentioned earlier, I've been involved with them on various projects off and on over the last 32 years. And they are pretty much, they have the complete package. They manage their own lands, 220,000 acres. They do the harvesting. They have a sawmill, and they also have value added. The value added is catching up with primary. A lot of the stuff they sell, like all the pulpwood they sell, they are putting in a smaller mill to deal with some of the smaller saw logs as well. So, and they are pretty much looked at as the standard in Wisconsin for forest management. 220,000 acres. You can see they kind of jump out in the satellite photo. Right here is Green Bay, and here's the Menominee Reservation. And I tried to correct this, but I was scared to do too much typing in here. I talked to Marshall Pecor this morning, and he corrected the numbers for me. They estimated in 1854, when they started management there, that there was 1.3 million board feet. Today, Marshall says there's 1.9 billion board feet. And they have harvested 2.5 billion board feet. So the bottom 2 numbers have been updated. And I just worked that out because I'm a numbers guy and I love to play with numbers. Over 161 years, that's looking at 15.5 million board feet being harvested per year. And obviously that's going to differ. Early on there wasn't as much harvested as today. And that equates to 72 board feet per acre per year. That's done on the Menominee. Single tree selection, they have a lot of northern hardwoods, is used in the Menominee. Marshall threw a number at me. They have a $58,000 budget for paint each year for marking trees, which equates to 5,000 gallons of paint they use. And they focus on cutting the worst and leaving the best, and continually improve the quality of the stand. And they have several worker programs. That's how I become involved with them. They have a safety program. They have a chainsaw trainer program, which they developed in the early 90s. When we started our program at FISTA, we were working with MTE, having our trainers go in there, and then they decided they had enough opportunity to have their own trainer, so they stole one of ours. But we still work together quite nicely. The saw training that we're doing right now, which I'll talk about in a little bit, one of their trainers is certified under our trainer program. And they also do skidder training, how to coordinate with chainsaw cutters, and to just general safety on skidders. And the advantage of community ownership is the forest is owned by the tribe as a whole, so everyone has a say in what happens. And it's a curriculum within the school to teach them about forestry management. So again, we're kind of looking at MTE as one of the leads within Wisconsin that we want to emulate and work with. Mechanized operator training. This has been a subject of discussion for years and years. And what I'm talking about here is cut to length. In Wisconsin, 80% of the wood that's harvested in the state is cut by mechanized cut-to-length systems, with a harvester on the left, and harvester on the right, and the forwarder on the left. In Michigan, it's 60% with these systems. In Minnesota, it's 40%. So what we have found, Don asked me, what success have you had? And the real success has not been with programs at a technical school level. They have not fared very well. I've been involved with 5 different ones. And the best way is on-the-job training. And safety and personal, this is something that I talked to a number of loggers, and I got this criteria, let's see, 11 different criteria. And the first thing they go over is the PPE, the personal protective equipment, machine maintenance, both daily, hours of operation, seasonal, and anything else, and then operating the machine. A lot of them say the cabs are big enough these days, they'll just put the guy in with them for half a day or whatever to watch them operate the machine. Then they'll let the guy operate for a while, and they'll be in the machine unless they think that's too much pressure, then they'll get out. And they'll just let them operate the machine then in a very low impact area where they don't think they can do any damage. One of the complaints is most of this equipment runs up to $500,000 a piece. So for a 2-machine system, you're looking at $1 million. And if you don't know what you're doing, there's a lot of damage that could be done. So the other thing is troubleshooting. What are some common mistakes? And they go over that both to begin with and continuously. Techniques to improve operational efficiency, just things that the guy has learned over the years, the guy who owns the equipment. A huge thing we have is tree species and product identification. On any one sale, we'll usually have a minimum of 4 species, an average of 9, and up to 20. 20 is the most I counted on any one job. And then depending how much of each species you have, it might just get mixed in as mixed softwoods or mixed hardwoods. But if you have enough of it, then it becomes its own product. So there's a lot of complications there. And then each species can have up to 6 sorts. It can go to pulpwood, it can go to bolts. With red pine, you can have utility poles, cabin logs. So there's a lot of that. And then basic record keeping. SFI training, something that most, even though it's not required by SFI, a lot of logging contractors require their employees to go through it. Have to be familiar with maps, harvest plans, computers, And is there any specialized training within the company, such as what a insurance company might require, things like that. And then cross-training on different equipment that's out there, just so there's a basic knowledge. Tech schools, like I said, I've been involved with several programs. They need to be practical, they need to have seat time, and I have not found one yet that has it. They talk about having it. I was involved with one at Badenoch Community College where Nortrax had dedicated a harvester for them to use. 2 weeks into the program, they got a better offer for it. They sold the machine. The program ended up without the harvester. So there has to be seat time. I was an instructor for one. It was a 16-week certificate. They ended up with simulator time but no seat time. And the loggers immediately said that we're not interested in that. We need somebody with the practical experience to come in. Hence, we got loggers doing the training on their own. The basic concepts, the simulator to me is very valuable just to see if somebody has the aptitude. Do you have that technical, mechanical aptitude to operate it? The person who started the Master Logger program in Maine, she was an expert in workforce development and skills. And she said when she studied it, the only occupation she could find where you needed more aptitude and hand-eye coordination than as a harvester operator was a fighter pilot. And I have proved that. I've gotten in a machine and the guy gave me 15 seconds and he said, get out of there or you're going to hurt somebody or yourself. So I have no mechanical aptitude. Here's a simulator, just the basic looking from behind and once you're in the cab. And like I said, just being in the simulator does not qualify you to go out in the woods and run a $500,000 machine. But at a high school level, it'll let you know, is this something you're interested in? Do you have the aptitude? That sort of thing. And a lot of people equate logging to being out there, you know, with the bugs and everything else, where you can be in an air-conditioned cab with the music going and having fun. Well, maybe not fun. Manual logging training. Game of logging, Soren Eriksson came over in the mid-'80s and started that here. Kind of a strange name for a serious thing. Soren retired in the late 90s, and it's kind of gone downhill from there. A guy I've been involved with in Wisconsin, Ken Lallemont, is 67. He said, before I retire, I want to have a training program out there. So we started SAWS, Safety and Woods Worker Training, which is a certification program for trainers. We don't have members. We certify the trainers. We have a certifying board. It's a way to keep them up on their skills. We do have sponsors where we get products from, and so we provide products to the trainers. And right now we're up to 10, and we've got 4 in the works. And there's 4 levels of training, 2 basic chainsaw full day training. You can do the first 2 back to back. The third one we say allow a month in between, and then a month in between the third and fourth one, which allows you to practice some of the skills you learn. Also, how to cut storm damage timber and how to maximize utilization if you're cutting a lot of saw logs. Workforce development needs. At the high school and elementary school level, awareness, information on careers, entry-level training, and then continuing training on the job. Recommendations. You know, logger certification, like I said, I don't know how it would apply because a lot of it is used to sell to private landowners for marketing. But there could be parts of the programs that would be very applicable to your operations. And logger training, manual, potentially, could have a tribal trainer on staff. Mechanized, the same thing. You'd have to work together with a dealer, potentially. You know, we've always looked at the possibility of getting a dedicated piece of equipment. The problem is between the different brands, there's a lot of, even within brands, different models have the operating systems developed separately. Or a regional support. If you're If you've got several tribes that are in the same timber types, potentially doing a regional support system. And then just talking about other careers that might be out there and how to address those. I'm sorry I don't have the print bigger on. That's just a number of websites I have for the organizations I deal with. Questions?
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Glenn Yellup. I work with the Bureau of Indian Affairs Yakima Agency. This looks like something I'd be willing to help pursue in our Northwest region. We have a lot of cutting going on. I work as a supervisory forester implementing contract compliance on logging operations. So my staff, we all, when we get a new person in, we have to orient them to what's happening, and I always try to find some type of anything to get them more, I go through the handbook, I go through the forest management plan, but I always kind of end up like, there's something missing here. And something like this might work in our region. I'm just curious, where can the person start?
Start with me. I don't know much, but I know a lot of people who know a whole lot of things. So, like I say, there's a lot of things, probably anything I've thrown out here you can't be able to use as is, but there can be bits and pieces we could take and come up with something that would fit your needs. So I'm more than happy to work with you.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. You want a cookie? I got my cookie left from lunch.
Well, you can tell he's a good type of trainer. Does anybody else want a cookie?
Oh, that was my last cookie. I should have waited.
I got a question. My name is Dave Hare. I work for the Leech Lake Reservation, northern Minnesota. Maybe not so much a question, but a couple comments. We have a lot of this in our area, the loggers, the logging. On our reservation, we don't have a logging truck, a logging company. We don't have any logging equipment. So when I go out to set up a sale, our forester, he puts out a bid, and these loggers come in and get the meat and potatoes, and we get the scraps. And it's been a discussion amongst us in our department where, how, when, what, and even to throw it at our tribal council, not only for our needs on our own reservation lands, but also Chippewa National Forest is starting to open some doors, and we're missing a great opportunity. Training for people to work. We have a temporary employment program which trains them for chainsaw operation, and that's about it. And there's a great need, and I guess this is the first I've heard of something like this for training. And maybe you've answered it already, just to maybe talk with you more. And is there anything in Minnesota that is like this?
No, I got to try to be politically correct. They do have the SFI training in Minnesota, but as with a lot of programs, there's a lot of seat time in classroom seats.
Yeah.
And one comment I had written down in my notes somewhere that I forgot to say is, you can teach accounting in a classroom, you can only teach logging in the woods.
Well, I totally agree with that. I totally agree that the only way they're going to learn that would be right out there amongst, and like you said, we go across the loggers, we go out and check the work they're doing. And you're right, we come out across one piece of equipment, it's $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like our tribe is missing out on a lot from not investing in training, because we're doing a lot of sales. Chippewa National Forest does a lot of sales, and we're right in the midst of it. We have people that want to work, want to be trained, but we're spinning our wheels. What do we do?
Do you have much interaction with Red Lake?
Not a heck of a lot.
Because we have one of our trainers from the SAW program goes up there at least on an annual basis. If they get new loggers in, he will go up there and do the chainsaw training.
Yeah.
But we can also offer the skidder training, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to talk to you about what we could help you with.
Sure.
And again, I'm wearing my hat as a contractor for the Forest Products Lab, because they have said that that's a priority, working with the tribes, and so any way I can help, I can help through them.
I guess it starts at home though, yeah, I mean, like, we don't even have the equipment, we don't have access to equipment, and I agree, you know, the training has to start right on the ground. It's very confusing, it's very frustrating.
Now I'm going to sound like a money-grubbing consultant.
Go ahead.
Because the first thing I would say is you need a feasibility study to what is feasible. What can you do with your allowable cut? Can you have your own crews? How can you maximize the potential on the reservation to employ your people?
Yeah.
So you got to look at how much is cut. And the Chippewa is a very good thing. Another thing I didn't mention is another project I'm working on is the Sustainable Resources Institute, the nonprofit. We have a master stewardship agreement with Region 9 of the Forest Service, which includes the Chippewa and the Superior. And we have one going right now, a supplemental project agreement on the Squamish, Nicolay, and Wisconsin, where we're taking the money from the timber sale that we're administering and getting service work done. And a lot of that service work is marking future sales. So there's the possibility, and I know there's different ways for the tribes to work with the Forest Service, with collaboratives, but that's something I can give you some assistance on as well.
Sure.
One of the things we talked, like at the TFPA, Tribal Forest Protection Act, and several of the tribes, as part of that TFPA, was the need for infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, to push that through. I remember San Carlos upgrading their sawmill, and I think we should thank the Forest Service, Forest Products Lab actually helped sponsor Don to be here today, and they're looking to help tribes. That Rusty Graham from the Forest Product, the program director, is looking forward, or looking towards a proposal from ITC, you know, that we, from the Northwest region for technician training, put that curriculum from high school, like in White Swan, or at Nispelum or Leech Lake, having that curriculum there and having a work group, you know, from ITC help put that together. So, is there any other? I think we need to in our 5 minutes, but it's great conversation. But just to mention that ITC does have a workforce implementation team we're starting to work together, and it sounds like we have some volunteers, at least, you know, knowing through. I know they're at Yakima and Colville and Warm Springs, they're interested, and I know the TFPA groups, the tribes that are involved with TFPA, also have workforce issues that this program and the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development is helping with the funding. So once again, please thank everyone and thank you for your time.